So I'm not sure if the bell's still ringing or not. It's always ringing for me. Well, I hope we described the first 3 chapters of the book pretty specifically there. I don't even think we cracked the book. I love talking about we agnostics. The most important thing in my life today is my relationship with God. Although I have a terrible time acting that way. And I didn't just make that up because it sounds good. It's really the purpose of our book in a couple spots, but one of them is page 25, and there's a solution. It says in the middle of the page, the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. So that's going to be the central fact of my life. That's almost as important as the line above, that the great fact that we've had these spiritual experiences. And then in the We Agnostics, it says that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. And I would note that it does not say problems. I got one problem. That's this idea, this feeling that I can be separated from the God of my understanding. And so, if I were, a lot of you guys read Richard Rohr. I love Richard Rohr. He talks about the 2 halves of life. If I were to talk about my 2 halves of sobriety, the first half would be coming to that truth that my relationship with God is the most important thing in my life. Now, before I started to believe that and try to practice that, I still had a belief in God. I still had an understanding that I needed God, but maybe kind of a co-pilot deal. Let's do this together. I'll get into more of that in the 3rd step. But I believe when we get here, we are all agnostics. And that's why I love this chapter so much. When I talked earlier about burning my life to the ground, that's when I met Scott. I called him up from 1,000 miles away, did my best to surrender. And I was like, man, I need your help. I got to do a 4-step. My life's a mess. He's like, let's just do all the work. Let's see if we miss something, which was, I don't think he was that smart to know to do that. I mean, he must have read it or something, but, and thank God we did, because we had a neat 4th-step experience, and it was great, and 5th-step experience, but going back through the work with a new perspective, with a lot of time, we agnostics changed my life. And I'll tell you, the first 18, 19 years of my sobriety, we'd get to we agnostics in a book meeting, and I read it with the same attentiveness that I read to the wives. It doesn't apply to me. I believe in God. Why are we reading we agnostics? I'm not agnostic. I believe in God. That's a waste of time. You know what I mean? If we had to vote what chapter we're reading, I'm not voting we agnostics. That's for the non-believers, And not that I really had much working knowledge or belief, but why I say we're all agnostics when we get here is a Gnostic is somebody with working experiential knowledge of. A Gnostic, Gnostic, a Gnostic. You have working experiential knowledge of. And so when we get here, new in sobriety, we do not have a working, effective, experiential relationship with God, a power greater than ourselves. Because if we did, we wouldn't have wound up here, right? Things would have gotten a little out of control, and we'd have gone to church or mosque or synagogue, wherever we find our God, and we just said, things are getting a little rough. I'm going to tap into this working relationship, and I'm going to go the other way. Off I go. And some people do that, and God bless them. That's not my experience. So we're all a little bit agnostics when we get here. And what I've found to be so profound about this chapter, so many things, but one of the things I like to point out is 7 times in We Agnostics, Bill talks about getting rid of our prejudices. And my sponsor for a long time was this this old black guy, and I remember saying, Charles, I'm not prejudiced. What are we even reading this for? Like, he's like, dummy, like we're not talking black and white. When Bill talks about prejudice, he's talking about our old ideas about God. All of this, and all we're going to talk about this whole weekend, at least by my perspective, is removing the things that block us from God. Each step is divinely designed to remove a piece of the puzzle of what's blocking us from God, or put a new piece in the stained glass window so when that light shines, we see it in a new way. That's what each step does, in my experience. And what's blocking me in the second step is these old ideas about God. Tell me if this sounds familiar. God's not powerful enough to fix my problems. Or, I've done so many terrible things, God's not going to give me another chance, right? How many times we've made that deal that Scott talked about? God, get me out of this, and I will never do it again. I got pulled over for DUI. I was 14 years old, and the cop was getting ready to arrest me, and I said, God, get me out of this, and I'll never do it again. The cop let me go. 15 minutes later, I'm on the beach, drunk out of my mind, buying drugs. I mean, there was no thought of, so I thought all those deals, all those lies I made to God had consequences. I had this old idea that God was keeping score, And why am I going to jump into a football game down 38-0 in the fourth quarter? I'm not going to play. One of the other old ideas I had about God was that it was merit-based, that I had to be good enough long enough to experience this forgiveness from God. And my conception of God has changed dramatically, certainly in 35 years, but even a lot in the last 5 years. And I hope it grows just as much in the next 5 years, in the next 5 days. I hope in the next 15 minutes it grows. I think one of the worst things we can do is think we've got God all figured out and in this little box, and now I've got it figured out, One of my favorite passages from our book is, I think it's page 11, Scott, tell me if I'm wrong, but when Ebby comes to see Bill, and he says, man, what's gotten into my old friend here, And Ebby says, I've got religion. And Bill says, I was aghast. And if you got thrown out of high school like I did, you don't know what aghast means. It means you threw up in your mouth a little bit, right? Like the idea of tolerating that concept is just disgusting. And that's the way I got here with, and because it was a lot easier just to discount this idea that I'm too broken for God, I can't be fixed, and than to really dive into this. But that's what my problem was, right? When you hear, I've said it, or when you hear a guy you're working with say, I'm really having trouble turning it over. I just, how do I do that? That's not a third step problem, that's a second step problem. That is always a conception issue. And one of the great things our book does is allows us to come up with our own conception, right? That's what separated us from turning into a formal religion, is when Ebby dropped that bomb on Bill. Bill, why don't you just choose your own conception, right? Because if he had said, Bill, you got to believe in little baby 7 pound 9 ounce Jesus in a golden fleece diaper, or you're done, Bill would have remained aghast, right? And, I like talking about this because we have so many new guys here, that's not what this retreat is not about, getting you to conform to our beliefs, right? It's about helping you have your own experience. But I can't go on to the third step without some type of conception, I believe, right? And I kind of ignorantly, for a long time, when taking guys through the steps, and in my own experience, on 46 and 47 says, as soon as a man says he's even willing to believe, we assure him he's on his way. And I thought that meant you can go from there right to step 3. Say the third step prayer. But I don't think you can. Because still in that chapter, a few pages later, somewhere 52, 55, we read it, right? We have a decision to make. God's everything or he's nothing. Bill wants you to ask yourself that question before you take a third step. Sam Shoemaker was one of AA's earliest best friends. He was from the Calvary Mission, is that right? Do I have that history right? Yeah, in New York. He was, one of the places Bill would show up to drunk, and he had a common love for the drunks. And I read one of his books, and he said, we cannot turn our will and life over to the care of God unless we have some idea who God is. And I'm not talking about figuring God out. Our book clearly says we'll never fully comprehend or understand that's God, right? I hope I don't. I mean, what % about God do you think you really know? I hope it begins with a decimal point. That's my experience. I hope I remain a seeker. And so when I talk about that, the most important thing in my life today is my relationship with God. One of the things I like to take to meditation is that idea. Scott often says, priority isn't something you declare, oh, this is my priority. When you look back on your previous week, you can look at your calendar and say, okay, that was a priority because that's what I did. I challenge you this. Most people here have an iPhone. I'm sure the Android has the same feature. Go into your iPhone settings and see how many times you picked up your phone in the day. It's a frightening number. I promise you it's in the hundreds, where it'll tell you every time you did this. Just that motion.
I don't want to know that.
It'll tell you how many times you did that. How many times a day did you consider, how can I get to know God better? My number is disgusting. I'm ashamed. I don't even know what my number is, but it's not a good number, right? How many hours a day did I spend thinking about my petty problems, my wants, my desires? And so when I talked earlier about kind of the two halves of recovery, or at least this part of the journey for me, is that first half is realizing that that's all there is developing this relationship with God. And the second half, once I know that that's the mission, then I'm on to something else, right? Because before I recognize that fact, I'm just running in circles. I'm trying to use God as a co-pilot, as I said, And so, how do I remain a seeker is the question. How much time am I spending in prayer and meditation and reading other stuff, right? Bill makes it very clear. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Go see a shrink if you need to. Get some other books. I love our big book. I love our big book, right? There's so much more out there. And if I'm gonna expand my effectiveness and understanding, that's what Bill calls us to do, I got to get some more resources, right? And so I was invited to create a new conception, and I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit about that in more depth. But I want to share with you a couple areas of how my conception has changed. Oh my! In recent years, that have really changed my life, and the one is I used to think God had a plan, and I'm not disagreeing with you if that's what you believe. And tomorrow I might say that's stupid. And I might believe something different. But I don't believe God has a plan anymore. I like it better. It makes more sense to me that God has an opportunity. And the one opportunity is to enjoy his love and to spread his love. That's the opportunity that God puts in front of us every waking moment of every day. I don't think God had this preordained plan. Dow's going to be an electrician. Barclay's going to be a teacher, and constantly battled us through the bumpers of life until we got to where he wanted us to be. That just doesn't make sense to me. I remember, during 9/11, hearing people come out of meetings saying, I knew some people that were in New York saying, man, I was supposed to be downtown that day, and I stopped, and it took 20 minutes to get my dry cleaning, and God must have had a plan. What? So the 3,000 people, that was God's plan? No, that wasn't God's plan, right? Or, one of our friends overdoses and dies. Well, God had a plan. No, that was Mikey's plan. So my job is to align my will. That's God's gift to us, is our free will, in my experience. So that's one, and the other is that I don't believe that this is a dangerous statement, and I hope I get the context right. I don't believe that God needs to forgive me. I don't believe, and let me tell you why before you roll your eyes. I don't think the love meter of God has ever been off 100 to be angry or disappointed or let down enough to need to forgive me. It's been 100 love all the time, no exceptions, in my darkest days, in my worst mistakes. Now, forgiveness is something I need to feel, and I want to feel from both the world, people in my life, and I don't want to feel like God has condemned me for something, but I believe that's a barrier I've put there. And so if you're one of our newer friends, and this just sounds like nonsense, I'm sorry. Alcoholics Anonymous does not care what you believe. We do not have a dog in that hunt. All of the great religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Mother Earthism, whatever you got ism, have one thing in common. They send their drunks to Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? And so I just, when we start talking about this stuff, I like to make this very clear, like whatever, the group of drunks is a great place to start. But I love talking about this idea of concept and it always changing, this perception. Because if I think God is too angry at me to help me, it can't happen, right? If he's not big enough to fix my problems, he can't fix my problems by definition, right? And so for a long time in sobriety, I'm putting AAA batteries into a AA remote. Not because my concept was wrong, is because I hadn't done this work, this examination. Like, let's see what works. Let's try some new things, which Scott's going to talk about. This kind of hypothetical experiment of trying some conceptions. I could just fill it in for you if I can have the next half hour, if that's all right.
I can't wait to hear me.
Okay.
Sounds really good.
It was good. I gotta have so much more I want to talk about on the second step. Who's going next, Barclay or Scott?
I think Scott's on the
Okay.
docket too.
Thanks, John. I'm Scott Lee, alcoholic. Hi, guys. Yeah, there's way too much to cover. We understand that. We're just going to get some of it. If you're new, if there's some of these steps you haven't done, I think our mission is to make you hungry for it, if I could define it. I'm on page 13, which is where the steps first appear in the book. They're in narrative form. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of pieces and kind of move on and turn it over to Barclay, because I can't wait to hear what Barclay has to say. So I'm going to turn it on. Yeah, I'm going to steal a little bit of Barclay's thunder here. 11 lines down on 13. Last word on the line, friend, capital F. That is a powerful piece of information in one word. Powerful piece of information. The fact is, if I get here terrified of God, I can't do step 3. There's no way in the world to make a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of a God that's mad at me, that hates me. I'm already going to hell, and there's nothing I can do. This idea of a God as a friend is one of the most powerful in here. Another one on page 12, which John already referenced, and I think I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Somebody asked you a question, and the moment before they asked, you did not know the answer. And you open your mouth, and not BS, but a piece of the great golden truth that you didn't know falls out, and 3 hours later you can't quote it. Sometimes you can't remember what it was. Who's had that experience? Put them up, and hold them up. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah. That's what happens here. And I think this is the first instance of it in the book on page 12. Because Ebby says, and it's in italics, so it's so important, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Ebby has gotten sober in the Oxford group, which is an offshoot of the Lutheran Church. They have a very specific concept of God. He's not here selling that. And I think that happened to him there. And he was able to open that door, which saved people like me. And so what I do with a new guy is I say, I'm going to ask you to lay aside what you believe about, not disbelieve, but just for the purposes of this exercise, lay aside what you believe, lay aside what you're trying to believe, and lay aside what they told you. And I don't care how qualified they claim to be, and let's just try what's working for about 3 million of your closest friends. And the way we're going to do it is I'm going to ask you to give me a series of single words and very short phrases that describe the individual characteristics you would like for God to have. I'm going to participate. If you like my suggestions, take them. If you don't like them, don't take them. And I had him write this in the inside back cover of his big book because I'm going to want him to read this last thing at night and first thing in the morning for the next month to get it set in his mind. Usually the first thing I say is forgiving. I tell him that wasn't good enough for me. I'm too guilty. I had to have a God that's eager to forgive. Forgiving wasn't going to get it for somebody like me. How about gentle, doesn't force me to his will? How about loving? Would you like to have a God that loves you? How about available 100% of the time? How about creative? How'd you like to have a God that comes up with clever ways to get you out of the holes you keep digging in your own life? How about sense of humor? I want a God that laughs and dances. Yeah. And how about a God whose will is a good deal? I got here scared of God's will. God's will, right? And man, I can't work with that. I need a God whose will is a good deal. I don't have that anymore. Today I'm convinced God's will is the very best deal there is. I intermittently forget that, but I believe it. And if and only if I can have all of those, then powerful. But many of us get here with a God I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. And I tell the guy, I'm not going to ask you to believe this. You can't. I'm going to ask you to test drive it. How do you think you might conduct your life if you believe this? Conduct your life in that manner for a while, and we'll just see what happens. Our buddy Joe Krogan, if you don't know that name, do yourself a big favor. Get some of Joe's talks. He said his sponsor said, we're going to have to make it really simple for you, son. Yeah, great. Okay, well, I'm just going to steal his day. He said, I got to make it simple for you, Joe. Step one, you're screwed. Joe says, wow, it's going to take America. I said, that's step two. Step three is why don't you try for one. Joe says, I don't believe in God. His sponsor says, you don't have to believe in God to be successful here, and you don't. But you must conduct your life like someone who does. That, for me, is the best definition of spirituality I've ever heard. Conduct your life like someone does, and we'll just see what happens. Page 13. John pointed this out to me. I learned this from him last year. Something that was added to the book, and I had not noticed it. Last paragraph, my friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. If you'd asked me a year ago today if I had a relationship with God when I came here, I would have said no. I was wrong. You've already heard it. My relationship was 911. When my tail feathers are ablaze, I check in, make a deal, and then don't cover my side. That's the way it is. So, and the way I look at it now is, in those days when I prayed, I was trying to make him my God. I've been taught here is how to make me his man. See, I had it upside down. But I had to get to this friendly God idea before that could possibly work. It had no hope at all. Page 45. Those who have been around for a while know that Bill Wilson was asked on a number of occasions the difference between shortcomings and character defects. He said, I just didn't want to use the same words over again. Here we are on page 45 using the same single word 6 times in 9 lines, starting 6 lines down. The needed power wasn't there. Human resources marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power was our dilemma. Had to find a power by which we could live. It had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously, or in how to find this power. Exactly what the book's about. Main object may be you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Go.
There's a great thing to point out there. If you notice the difference between the first 3 powers and the next 3 powers.
Capitalize.
Capital P.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. This last sentence I read can be read either 2 ways. I can either read it that the finding of the power solves my problem, or that I find the power and the power solves my problem. I think they're both right. I'd like to know what it does not say. It does not say I find the power and I use the power to solve my problem. I do not solve my problem. I am my problem. So I don't need to be trying to solve it myself. If I were to have a favorite page today in the book, it'd be 46. Because for me, 2 of the most powerful and important concepts in the entire text appear on this. First full paragraph, yes, we have agnostic temperament, have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We sound that as soon as, that means right dadgum now. As soon as we are able to lay aside prejudice, express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, commence to get results. This next phrase is one of the most important in the book. Though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God. So when we talk about God as you understand him, we're not saying you're going to understand God. You are not. The book says very clearly that you're not. My sponsor says the teacup of my mind cannot contain the ocean of God. And I think that lays it out pretty close. Pretty close. While I'm doing important, we'll go back to Roman numeral 22 for what I believe is the most important phrase in the entire text. It's in the reading on the forward to the third edition. If you get to the doctor's opinion, just turn one page toward the front of the book and you'll find it. XXII, third paragraph. The basic principles of the AA program, it appears, hold good with individuals with many different lifestyles, just as the program brought recovery to those with many different nationalities. Here it comes. The 12 steps that summarize the program. We hear the word program all the time. Here's the definition. The 12 steps we see on the wall are a summary of that program. My sponsor said that's the Cliff Notes. And if that was the whole program, we'd have a pamphlet instead of a book. And guys like Scott are too sick to start to get sliding by on the Cliff Notes. I was going to need the whole thing. Pretty important. I think probably the two best pieces of news I've ever gotten in my entire life are in this book. I'm going to cover one of them now. I'll cover one of them later. Back on page 46, 5 lines from the bottom. We found that God does not make too hard terms to those who seek him. Let me translate that into Tennessee English for you. God ain't mad at us. That's some good news. That's not what I've been told. That's some mighty good news. Once again, steps 2 and 3, not possible with an angry God. Literally not. Page 57, the very top. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. Such times a great revulsion had risen up in him, seemingly he could not drink, even he would. God had restored his sanity. Sanity, kind of interesting word. My third sponsor, a guy named John Bradford, picked up the nickname Rusty. Mm-hmm. At the end of his drinking, he was drinking mouthwash mixed with Kool-Aid, and he wet his pants so many times his zipper rusted shut. And we nicknamed him Rusty in honor of the zipper. And he loved his nickname, by the way. You're lucky if you get one you like here in this outfit. But I give you 2 pieces of wisdom from Rusty. One of them was, he said, I'm not responsible for what I think. I'm responsible for how long I think it. I can't keep garbage from showing up here in my head. When it gets dirty up here, I can sweep. That is my responsibility. Sandy Beach said the same thing in different words, and he was not talking about relapse. And he said, the measure of my recovery is not whether I get off the path. We all get off the path. The measure of my recovery is how quickly I get back on. Powerful, powerful stuff. The other one from Rusty, having to do with sanity. Oh, yeah. He said, in the history of planet Earth, no human has ever been put in an insane asylum for being insane. Never, not once. They put us in there for acting insane. Nobody's been let out for being sane. They let us out for acting sane. So on those days when you're crazy, if you don't act on it, they won't know.
We know, though.
Don't tell them. They're not ready. Pick up the phone. Tell one of us we're ready, and we're not all crazy on the same day. That might be the best piece of advice I ever got. Yes. Don't tell them. I want to continue on 57. Right, this but a miracle of healing, yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. In my case, I worked my way into a hole I couldn't lie my way out of. Humbly offered himself to his maker. Then he didn't say, help me. He said, take me. Help me and take me are not the same prayer. Not the same. Even so, as God restored us all, so here's this promise of sanity and restore our right minds. This man, the revelation was sudden, some grown to it more slowly. Here's maybe the most powerful promise in the book. He's come to all who have honestly sought him. I like the analogy that God's kind of like the mother of a 3-year-old playing hide and seek with her child. Where does she hide? She hides where the child can find her. This is my heavenly parent. Where does he hide? Yeah, I think so. I'm sure something else will bubble up, but I'm going to hand it over to Barclay for a little while. I'm probably going to want this back.
No. You? Yeah. All right, cool. I'm Barclay. I'm an alcoholic. Step 2 says, came to believe, right? Came to believe. I want to tell you, I mentioned a little while ago about kind of like, I spent the last 3.5 years of my drinking career. Literally, I'd go to work, I would come home, I'd buy a 12-pack of Budweiser. I would put on credit card a 12-pack of Budweiser, and I'd steal a bottle of NyQuil, and I would drink until I passed out. And there were a lot of things that went on. There was a whole bunch of stuff in my childhood that just, we'll talk about it if you want to talk about it. There's suicide. There's like my dad ended up giving, he was a veterinarian, right? Lots of dog dope. He ended up giving everything that he ever made to his third wife that he'd already left. I didn't get anything, right? My brothers and I split the money that he had on him when he died, right? I had me a resentment, right? I don't have this huge bottom that you hear a lot of times. I came to and all the cops were around me with their guns drawn and all that stuff. I didn't even know what my bottom was until I got sober. My brain kind of cleared a little bit. And I remember yet another morning. It was a morning just like any other day in my life. I came to in the morning. My wife was pissed off at me. I was pissed off at her. I didn't know why she was pissed off at me or why I was pissed off at her. But I knew that we were pissed off at each other, right? And I was leaving out the door, and I was going to this job that I hated, getting in this beat-up truck that I hated. She was at the back door, and I hated her. And she had my 2 kids with her, and I wasn't crazy about them. And I got in that stupid truck, and I remember this, and I screamed at the top of my lungs, "What in the do you want from me, dude? You have been hawking with me my entire life. What do you want? What do you want from me?" And there's no like, or anything like that. Just I started up that stupid truck and I went to that stupid job. And that was sometime in October, maybe November of 1989, when John was just racing ahead of me spiritually. And that was sometime in November of 1989. And in January of 1990, I ended up going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that's what he wanted from me. I did not have a good relationship with God when I got here. I was pissed at God. He had been screwing with me my entire life, right? And so if step 2 had said, okay, so I'm powerless over alcohol. Yep, and then there's the M dash. Don't forget the M dash, right? And then it's like, and if it had said, believed that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, I would be dead right now. I know this in my heart. It doesn't say that. It says, came to believe. I come to believe. I did not, and Scott walked me through that whole, I have this theory that like maybe there is a God. I don't know. I've never had a big, spiritual lightning crash. But what I do know is that when I when I just try, and I love, again, I'm going to kind of go to the step 12 again. It says, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles on all our affairs. And when I'm just trying, the God of my understanding is one. My relationship with God, I truly feel I'm a different guy than walked in here however many years ago. And my relationship with God is completely different. I truly believe. I thought God was a really good, Bush League pinch hitter, right? God, if all else fails, hey, God, right? You were talking about your beliefs that you have today, right? The belief that I have in God is that this sounds completely, God is love, right? God is love, period, the end, right? And I believe in my heart that there is only one power in the world, and that power is love. You can say it's the strongest power if that works for you. I don't care what you believe, because I am an alcoholic, and if people told me what I needed to believe, again, I would be dead. I would be dead. But there is a power, and when I have tried running life myself, not so good at it. And I've tried this whole God idea, right? And I have come to believe. And my sobriety has been way high, way low. I've burned my life to the ground. John was 17 years. At 9 years, I completely burned my life to the ground. Ended up losing my job, ended up losing my marriage, ended up losing a whole bunch of stuff. Never thought of drinking. Not once. That's insanity, man. That's insanity. I ended up calling Scott and saying, Scott, I think I need to do a fourth step. Just like, and Scott, Mr. Fourth Step, right? What he said to me was, I don't know how to do that. And I went, what are you talking about? You're Dr. Fourth Step, right? He goes, I only know how to go through all the steps. And God tricked me into having him as my sponsor. You knucklehead, you. My God does have a huge sense of humor. A huge sense of humor. I think when I'm laughing with you, God is completely there. When we are joined in that world. So, is that we are. Is it 9, right?
We got plenty of time.
Do we? Yeah. Fantastic. And I'll share a little bit of my time.
Go have a good time.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, okay, cool.
A couple of pieces that came to me. I was thinking I should have been listening. I was thinking,
Sometimes quickly.
God forgives me for everything I ever did, and he loved me while I was doing it. Mm-hmm. I heard that 38, 39 years ago in a meeting. My God got bigger that day. Not too long ago on a Zoom meeting, I seem to be doing a lot of those, and a lady with less than a year said to me, my concept of God has changed. Should that scare me? I said, I think it should scare you if it doesn't. Because what's happened for me is through the years, my God has got bigger and better and more gentle, more compassionate, more loving, put anything else you can put in the plus column, more. That's been my experience. I also heard this, and forgive it, it sounds like a cheap joke, but I heard this in a meeting. Somebody meant it. Said, I'm having trouble getting a grip on letting go. You can see how that might happen. I was also told that faith is just hope with a positive track record. You can't have faith, but you can have hope. So why don't you hope this concept of a good God is for real and conduct yourself that way, and we'll just simply see what happens. And what you will get is that positive track record. Page 28. It's already told me, it's going to tell me later that I cannot understand God.
American numbers, right?
Yeah, page 28 in the American numbers. Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, just above halfway down the page. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living Creator with whom may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms, as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. I cannot understand God. I'm not trying. But I can understand the relationship. And the relationship is He's in charge, and I'm good with that. And He knows what He's doing, and I don't. And I invite Him in each morning. By the time I've been awake 2 or 3 minutes each morning of my life for a very long time, I've invited Him in to run my life for the day. And forever. I throw that in quite often, but for the day. I invite Him in as CEO, as boss, as manager. I use all those terms. And I remind Him, because He's old, I don't want Him to forget, that, that I was not drafted. I'm a volunteer. I'm a volunteer. I've not surrendered in a very long time. Surrender's after the fight. I got no fight left. This morning I did not surrender. I volunteered. It comes from a very different place, but has a very similar result. And I got one more thing I wanted to look at, just because I think this is kind of fun. Page 25. John already read this. But I'm going to correct him. No, it's not true. Not true. But there are two ways to read this sentence, and I think they're both right, but it really lights me up.
You're going to expand it. You're going to expand it.
Expand. Yeah, it's right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous, or has entered our hearts and lives in a way that's indeed miraculous. I can read it both ways, and I think they're both right. I think they're both right.
Thanks, Scott. Barclay was talking about what I claim to believe, and the kind of the arrogance of that really struck me. I want to kind of change how I word that. Those are recent conceptions I've been trying to prove wrong that I haven't been able to prove wrong. I'm not arrogant enough to say that my belief is X, and I know that's not what you were saying. I just because that's what we do, right? We come up with some conceptions because our old conception didn't work, right? God hates me. He's not big enough. He's keeping score. I'm in big trouble. That's the conception when we get here for a lot of us. And so we're going to try this new conception. And if you talked about it earlier, I wasn't listening. Chances are good. But we don't, we're not going to fake it till we make it and just pretend like these things. We're doing a scientific experiment. We're going to come up with these conceptions, and let's see if they're true. And that takes me from I got here with a belief system, this convoluted belief system. I don't know where I got it from. I never went to church as a kid unless someone was married or buried. But I came here with this convoluted belief system. There's just a little bit of the Cosby Show and a little bit of like some other television shows developed my, I think people, and maybe this isn't true for you, but obviously people who are raised in a religious background, that's where a lot of people get their conception. What I've noticed, and this is just jailhouse observation, is that people who don't have a religious upbringing typically get their conception of God from their father. It's typically exactly the same. And again, you can do with that what you will. In this page on 47 really struck me. A guy that we love in our home group named Raheem, who I sponsor for a while now, about a year and a half. I was with him in Paul and I took a meeting in this treatment center, and he was in the back, and I could tell he was like struck. And we did questions and answers at the end, and he had this question. It says, "I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I can't accept surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him." And that's why I wanted to grab the mic back to talk about. The idea here is to develop a relationship. We're going to act as if it's like. Let me give you an analogy for the new guys. Let's say you're 3 months sober and you're dating a new girl. She's got 2 months sober, right? healthy relationship, right? You're going to go into this hoping some things are true. You're going to, right? You're going to hope medically that she's cleared. And you're going to act as if she's healthy. You're going to act as if you're going to hope she's going to be faithful, that she's honest, that she cares about you, that she's not going to just carelessly throw away your affections, right? You're going to act as if these things are true. And if she holds up her end of the bargain, the relationship will build, right? You're not checking on her anymore. She's where she says she's going to be. You know, she doesn't smell like a different guy's cologne. Like, the relationship is going to build. But at the beginning, you take that leap of faith. You're just going to hope these things are true. And that's what I had to do. And that's what I ask my guys to do, is let's just hope these things are true. I'm not trying to sell you anything, that God has these characteristics, these concepts. You know, what do you need in order to turn your will and your life over to God? And the third step, any poker players, all your chips, we're going to say, push them in the middle of the table, and you are going to be required to say, I'm all in, right? So if that's the deal, what do you need God to be? And Scott talked about it. I need him to be loving, caring, forgiving, sense of humor, all these different things, right? And just walk through this process and see if they're true. One of my favorite pages, we'll go one more page and then we'll take a break for the night. No. Oh, we're not? All right. All right.
You can take a break.
Perfect. I'm leaving that alone. 52, middle of the page. I can say this about my sobriety. This is not just the first 18 years of reading this. I thought they were talking about a drunken state. This can be said about our sobriety. We were having trouble with personal relationships. Sober. We couldn't control our emotional natures. Sober. We were a prey to misery and depression. Sober. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's what I'm like without the 12 steps. You know, and in these next, what is it, Scott? 36 pages, there's a whole bunch of instructions. And if you take those instructions, you get to the exact, what I think are the exact opposite. Some people use a different example, but I like this example. I think it's 88 is the exact opposite of those. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become more efficient. We don't tire so easily. We are not burning up energy foolishly as we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. There's 36 pages of instructions between those two states, you know. Again, if you're one of our new friends, we're not trying to sell you any of this. We're just asking you to examine is the power that you're using, is that working? And if not, hopefully you're willing to try something different.
I've been playing with the idea of the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion says, believe this. Spirituality says, these are the actions we took and we like the result, and we think if you take similar actions, you'll like the result.
I talked about my relationship with God when I got here, right? And it really has developed into, I have, if you'll go to page 568, it's back in the spiritual experience, right? And it talks about, most of us think, I've gone from, my experiences is I've gone from like, I was not a fan of this guy, he'd always had it out for me, to he is an ally, he is a friend of mine, I really hang out with him. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. It is a moment to moment, I trust the guy. That's the thing, is I trust the guy. Yeah.
That takes me to Roman numeral 16. XVI. In the forward to the second, about 8 or 9 lines down. Bill is leaving the Oxford group. He's going to take some, but not everything with him. Says he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups. He was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution of those harmed, helpfulness to others. Here it comes. And the necessity. I've always wondered if that was important. The necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. What strikes me is Bill separates belief in God from dependence upon God. They are not the same. I got here pretty much believing there was a God and not having a higher power. It is as I learn this healthy dependence that I think I actually begin to have what we call a higher power. And it is based on my beginning of a, quote, good God on my team wants what's best for me, and then allowing that to grow. I want to share a personal experience because we talked a little bit about God's will, and I had an epiphany on that some time ago, and I want to share it with you. I was sitting by a stream, and I looked across the stream, and I saw a cloud. I'm sitting there just looking at it. I thought, every drop of rain in that cloud's following God's will perfectly. There's no question about it. So's that tree, so's the bird in the tree, so the little fish in the stream. Why can't I? And it was on me harder than what I just did. Why can't I? They can't. Why can't I? And I got my answer. The answer is, I am. I am convinced that God did not put me here to be perfect. If you think you're supposed to be perfect, I wish you a lot of luck. You're going to need it. But if I'm not supposed to be perfect, what's my job? The answer is my job is to make mistakes. They've sent the right guy. and I've been told in my life we learn from our mistakes. Really? Well, in that case, no one in this room's been arrested more than once. Sure, right. So they got that piece wrong, at least for guys like me. Yeah. So here's the definition: a mistake. It's an invitation to a lesson. The evidence is, if I learned the lesson, would not have made the mistake. It's just a lesson dressed in its work clothes. And the simple fact is, I don't have the power to make a mistake so ugly that God can't turn it into something magnificent, not fix. That's who I am. That's who he is. I regularly, frequently watch him using the worst things I've ever done as tools to help other people. Magnificent, amazing stuff. So here's the learning process as I understand it today. 1, make a mistake. 2, be notified I made a mistake. I don't always know. 3, own the mistake. Yeah, I did that. And if they only know 80%, I have to tell them the other 20. That's how I own it. 4, consult a spiritual advisor about how to make the amend. Usually, not always, but usually there's an amend to be made. 6, embrace the lesson. The lesson comes from making the amend, not to making it a mistake. That's where it comes. That's why that's so critically important, is that I take responsibility for these things, because that's where my learning happens. So 6 is embrace the lesson. If you hold this idea that that's how I learn, half of our steps are about me embracing the results of my mistakes. 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are all about me embracing the results of my mistakes. That's what they're about. Half of the steps. So 6 is embrace the lesson. 7, share the lesson. That's what really sets it for me. 8, when I share the lesson, I have to tell you I made a mistake. If I just share the lesson, I'm preaching and nobody wants to hear it. When I stand as a sinner beside a sinner, he can hear me. 9, make the next mistake. I've discovered God's will. I have no idea what his plan is. I've discovered God's will. It's for me to make mistakes. That's why I'm here. That is if you don't have that piece yet, let me tell you, it is unbelievably freeing. It is so freeing. I have my own permission to make mistakes. We talk a lot about progress. I give you my own definition. Progress is making the same old mistake a little less often, or making a new and finer quality of mistake. Anything beyond that's perfection, and that is not my assignment. Yeah. But that's only half the freedom. The other half is that you have my permission to make mistakes. Let me define you. All my family members, all the men I sponsor, major politicians that I like and don't like, those of you who got your driver's licenses out of Cheerios boxes, everybody has my permission to make mistakes. Because if I'm going to be upset by what you do, I'm a prisoner of your behavior. I don't want to be a prisoner anymore. I've been a prisoner too long. So half the freedom is have my own permission to make mistakes. The other half is you have my permission to make mistakes. And those two things free me. to be okay right here, right now. Then I'd be upset. I discovered the source of all of my anger. I tell you where it all comes from. It comes from being sure I'm right. Never had been angry, well, also absolutely certain I was right. And being right comes from having passed judgment. That's why I can't work on my anger, because anger is a problem, but it's really a symptom. The problem is judgment. Judgment is anger's grandmother. But it's been right at 11 years ago. That just came to me in a flash one time. I realized it. That's the source of all my anger is judgment. And I'm pretty sure God didn't put me here to judge. And so I added to my morning prayer, bless me, I don't judge. And I can report tremendous progress. I don't want to judge people. I don't want to judge their motives. And I don't want to judge any situations. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Zen story about the old Chinese farmer way back when, where the Lord of the Valley owned everything, but the sharecroppers could own their animals. And he had this one farmer had this magnificent white horse. And he woke up one morning, the horse was gone. And all his friends said, it's such a bad thing. He said, I don't know if it's good or bad. No, I had a horse and now I don't. Oh, it's good or bad. The next morning he woke up, the horse was back in the crowd with 6 other horses just like him. And his friend said, it's great. It's the best thing ever. He said, I don't know if it's good or bad. No, I had a horse, didn't have a horse. Now I got 7 horses. The next morning, his only son was saddle breaking one of the new horses and was thrown and broke his leg. His friend had said, it's so bad. He said, I don't know if it's good or bad. Had a horse, didn't have a horse, 7 horses, got a son with a broken leg. I don't know if it's good or bad. The next morning, the army came through and drafted all the young men to go fight in a battle, and none of them would survive. And they couldn't take his son because he had a broken leg. And I'm trying hard to learn what that farmer knew, that I don't need to be assigning good or bad to any events either. Don Pritz, I hope you know, please, I hope you know that name. If you don't, do yourself a huge favor. And what he would do when things didn't go like he wanted, he would just stop and say, as you wish. Just a simple prayer of as you wish. I've been working on that for over a year. I had a little bit of success. That to be thankful for the little stones of the way. I was driving down Nolensville Road and I stopped at my 5th traffic light in a row. And I'm sitting there thinking evil thoughts about this traffic light's mother. And it occurred to me that it was at least remotely possible that that 5th traffic light was the one that kept me from being in a wreck with a gasoline truck. And that maybe God is the God of little events too. And that I need to take those things that don't go my way as reminders to check back in with him. You guys talk so beautifully about getting checked in and staying checked in. That's what this thing is about. And I've been praying and doing the best I can. I pray about it every day, if it's been well over a year, to learn to take those little stones of the way as just reminders to check back in. I can report some progress, and I'm hoping for some more. Are you guys here? Yep. Are you ready?
I think our hour's up.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Ours is that we don't know about you.
Yeah. Well, almost. I'm almost. I'm one more little piece. You know the term at large? When it came to you, I was at large. Today I'm free. The difference is when I was at large, I was looking over my shoulder all the time. What if they find out this, and plan A and plan B, and what lie am I going to have to tell to cover the lie of the Lord? And I'm just, it's always busy in here. Today I'm free. I told you about that freedom. And if I screw up, I tell you. I'm not worried about what you're going to find out. I already told you. And that has made it very calm and peaceful in here. Thank you. It's been a wonderful day for me, guys. How are we getting out of here, John?
Yeah, so
Here we go.
just a quick little announcement. Tomorrow morning, breakfast is at 8 in the same room we had dinner in. And that's going to be quick breakfast, 8 to 8:30. We don't need 45 minutes to eat breakfast. And then 8:45 we'll be right here. So please get your nicotine in, your eggs in, and be ready for the first session tomorrow morning at 8:45. Breakfast is at 8. Are we playing werewolves tonight? Go ahead.
I thought it was going to breakfast 8 to 8:30, and then we're going to start at 8:30 and run to 9:45 on this.